Now back to South Africa, where the Integrated Resource Plan of 2010 is said to be outdated. Its assumptions no longer apply, and its recommended investment decisions not optimal. This is the view of the energy expert, Professor Anton Eberhard. He's the UCT Graduate School of Business leader. He has repudiated the statements in favor of nuclear energy for South Africa as made by Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe yesterday. Now, Professor Eberhard is also a member of the National Development Commission. He now joins us from our Cape Town studios. Professor Eberhard, how is it that the Deputy President of South Africa champions a nuclear plan as central to how we're going to meet our energy requirements when the National Development Plan doesn't really place that kind of premium on nuclear energy as the key to reaching, or making realizable our energy targets?
Well, I mean, clearly this is a very big issue, and it's important that we get it right. Energy investments typically are by far the most important and by far the biggest infrastructure investments. They dwarf telecommunications, water and transport. And nuclear energy in particular is very capital intensive. One nuclear plant could cost us about 100 billion rand, between 70 and 100. If we went for a fleet of 6 reactors, we're talking about an investment of more than 500 billion rands. So clearly having the debate, having the information on the table is very important. The Deputy President is right in referring to nuclear energy. Our existing power plan, which was formulated in 2010, has a place for nuclear energy. But I think most stakeholders, including the Department of Energy, would now admit that the existing power plan is out of date. It's out of date in a number of respects. The kind of demand that was forecast going forward is no longer appropriate. In the last few years, we have much more updated information on energy costs. Nuclear, for example, the costs have risen very, very substantially, and renewable costs have actually gone in the opposite direction, where they are starting to become competitive. So what we said in the National Development Plan, and what the commissioners have been saying, is we should recognize the risks, the possible risks that a nuclear future poses. And we have framed these risks as primarily being one of cost and time overruns. We've seen this experience in a number of different jurisdictions around the world, particularly the reactors that are being built in Finland and France at the moment. But we also then refer to the risk of financing. A huge investment like this would need a sustainable financing plan. So in the Planning Commission and in the NDP, we said, let's at least craft a plan B to see if a plan B is feasible. And I think this report that came out today refers to some modeling that we commissioned, which shows us that it's indeed possible to craft a future which would give us secure energy supplies, that would enable us to meet our Copenhagen commitments, and we could do this at lower cost than going the nuclear route. So really what we're doing here is trying to catalyze an informed debate, and I'm sure that at the end of this debate we'll come to better decisions.
Professor Eberhard, let me quote what Mr. Motlanthe said yesterday. He said that it is strategically sensible nuclear, and that it requires us to use other energy sources in addition to coal. And then he says, of course, the expansion of energy capacity is a precondition for sustainable economic development. We have now seen how erratic electricity supply in the form of load shedding can inhibit economic development in various ways. Clearly making the case that our current supply is not sustainable, and that we need to look at other options. The cost factor in terms of nuclear energy as an option you have put out there. Why is Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe flying the flag for nuclear energy when the NDP is clearly putting up warning signs that it's not necessarily the most viable route to go?
Yeah, as I said previously, nuclear is part of the existing plan that was crafted in 2010. But I think everyone, as I said earlier, would recognize that it's out of date, and that we need to be looking at the most up-to-date data. I think the Deputy President is right in saying that we need to think about electricity security. Clearly, we need enough power to support economic development in the future. He also points out the important fact that we need to do this plan in a way in which we can reduce our carbon emissions. And I think what we've put on the table as the National Development Plan is to say probably the least risky way of doing this is a diverse portfolio of energy projects which would meet our power needs. Now, so going for smaller, more modular, more flexible technologies like renewable energy, like gas technologies, imported hydro, smaller fluidized bed coal combustors that can be built within a short time, lower capital costs, and can be adjusted according to demand growth as it goes forward. I think the old paradigm of building mega nuclear plants, mega coal plants is something which increasingly countries around the world see as a risky strategy. These are highly capital intensive, they're very prone to cost overruns, it's very difficult to predict in 10 years exactly what our power demand will be, so you either overbuild or underbuild. Going for a more diverse, flexible portfolio of projects, I think clearly is the way forward. We've put this forward as a plan B, as a basis for discussion, and we anticipate that there would be a very helpful, I think very fruitful discussion in the next couple of months, and I'm sure that we'll make the right decision.
Now, in terms of the different plans and options that have been put on the table, of course, all of them have to be monetized. We have to look at what the cost layouts are going to be. But one of the big drivers, of course, of the debate is also the fact that these are massive tenders that are being put out. And we know that this has been the source of a lot of controversy in the state's ability to kickstart the economy. From where you're sitting, to what extent do you think the fact that this is a large tender that is going to go out, to what extent is this kind of fueling the debate, let's say, in favor of any particular, form of energy supply? And if you look at the kind of slice of the pie that the nuclear option presents, there's a lot of money at stake here, isn't it?
Well, clearly it's a lot of money. As I mentioned, if we build a fleet of nuclear power plants, that's R500 billion rand. It'll be one of the biggest procurement exercises this country has ever taken.
Well, some say the biggest.
The Medupi and Kasilia projects, it would dwarf the arms procurement process. But let's accept some facts here. We haven't started that procurement process. A decision has not yet been made to actually commence that procurement process. A very careful set of preliminary investigations are being undertaken around costs, around how we finance this, and all that will need to have to be completed before the actual exercise is started of starting the procurement. And then once we get the costs, if we go that far, we still have to then make the decision whether we will be able to finance this program. It goes back again to what I said earlier, is again a way of spreading your risks, is not going for these huge, big projects where you can get these potential procurement difficulties or problems with cost overruns and financing. Rather, the strategy should be to diversify the portfolio of projects, a whole series of procurement exercises. I mean, for example, we've just had a highly successful procurement of more than 3,000 megawatts of renewable energy technologies. We've seen prices fall. We've seen in the round one, 28 new private investors coming in with more or less 47 billion rand of private investment being generated. This spreads the risk amongst a whole series of projects and a whole series of investors, and I think is good for energy security.